We don't just believe in Quran, we believe in Sunnah, because Sunnah is context. Quran is content, and Hadith and the Sunnah is context. It's why when people go to the Prophet _SAW and said, advise me, and the Prophet says, you don't be angry, you need to brush your hair, this way it would look better on you than someone else. Does that mean a good Muslim is a well-combed man, a man with well-combed hair, groomed, who, you know, maybe has a flat pack and who, you know, never gets upset? No, that's not what Islam is. It's context. It's based on that particular person. So I think context is important and usually missing from a lot of social media and the pills that you take. Let me tell you about when that chemical gets released, and then you teach them. What's the difference between you and this child? What's the difference? And then you continue the conversation. So now we've had a conversation about puberty in a way that doesn't go into graphic details, that a parent has a choice on how graphic they want to be, right? The same thing. A lot of male Islamic teachers, they, well, how do we talk about periods and how do we explain why mum's not praying? I've got so many of these stories. All I do is, so a lot of my workshops with parents is mainly just storytelling, talking and explaining. And what we're doing in that whole process for me as the psychologist is reducing the parents' angst, teaching them there is a way to do this. Don't have to freak out, even if you don't know the answer. And then we go through how do you deal with it if you don't know the answer. There's probably about a third of the students that have experienced either ongoing or one-off, but they've experienced it. And so when we talk about these children, what can they do to prevent it? 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, they were drinking, they were dressed inappropriately. No. It is the person who's doing the wrong thing that needs to be held to account. So I think we need to really revisit what it means to be a victim. The true victim is the one who couldn't help themselves and felt like they had to take on somebody else's personal space. To become a perpetrator is the true victim. Because how could you live a life where you feel entitled to take on someone else's space, regardless of what they're wearing and what they're doing? And, you know, so I think it's easy to say, oh, well, it's all the victim's fault. But what if we turned that on its head and said the victim is a group of 5-year-old children, all in kindergarten, and the perpetrator was a child support worker?
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome to another episode of the FairDinkum podcast. Today's intro is obviously just myself. None of the boys are here, but they did join me, Welly and Sus, on the couch today. But don't worry about them. The main guest is Toltu. So she's a psychologist and also a sex educator. This is a very informative episode. We talk a lot about her journey through solo traveling and how she learned a lot about life and obviously some life skills, and through that finding ventures of, you know, reviving the language of Oromo back in her country and all around the world, especially in the Western countries, connecting with communities, and also some interesting things about some projects she's been up to about SA, and also like going through the teachings of with parents, teachers, and talking about certain taboo topics. A lot of topics have been mentioned, and a lot of taboo topics especially, but exactly what we need in our community. And you guys are going to love this episode. It's very informative, so let's get into it.
I really
Start to realize who your true friends are, huh?
Yeah, because I'm like, normally, because I'm extroverted and I'm happy to make friends and chit-chatty and people like mill around, but I'm like, would I bring this person to my home? No. So I'm like, just didn't bother.
And I think most people in high school don't like recognize that. They just feel like because maybe you have the same interest and it's like, okay, we just have to hang out now. Yeah. It's out of convenience. But then you don't realize till sometimes after university.
100%.
Yeah.
That's life.
What was there an incident that happened that, because at a young age, that's pretty...
profound.
Yeah,
just to be aware.
And then to like endure that 1 year of like not having friends because of a choice that you made.
I think it's interesting. It probably goes back to when I was 10 years old. I mean, I always felt like an outsider. I was always othered, and partly because of being from dual heritage, because literally my parents were black and white, and the cultures in some ways were black and white as well. So I wasn't quite black enough to be black or white enough to be white. It's kind of like literally brown and in the middle. And alhamdulillah, it was a blessing. I could speak the language. Speaking the language is a real like straight in. Like that's the key into any culture, I feel like, if you speak the language fluently. But having said that, because I was such an outsider, I was always like ready to kind of make friends and be friendly and so on. And then when I think it wasn't when I was 10 years old, it was in year 10, sorry. Back then it was like the American bombings happened, the September 11. And I couldn't go to school. Like I got stuff thrown at me, and like I had to be driven to school, and like I thought it was weird.
This was a public school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And school didn't do too much about it either. They didn't know how to deal with it. But I just thought, is the whole world like the suburb that I live in? And inshallah, I'm going to find out when I finish uni or finish high school. And so at the time, my parents weren't earning a lot. So there was this Centrelink payment for like 16-year-olds. Does that even exist still? I don't know.
Oh, I think
like
it does,
job
but they
seeker?
take ages.
Yeah, they take
It
forever.
takes ages. No, it's like family tax benefit or something.
Oh, no. So back in the
Oh,
day,
that's-
back in the day.
One off or is it?
No, fortnightly. So it was a youth allowance or something.
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
That
called.
that's
still
one.
exists. Yeah.
Oh, that still exists. So I was
I was gonna say something bad. I was gonna say the Somali thing.
I think it was youth allowance, and my parents didn't want me to have it. And they were like, "No, we're raising you." And I thought, "No, I'm going to go overseas and visit my family." And so they thought, if you think it's so easy to save, keep that money and let's see how you go.
Yeah.
I did keep that money. I did save it. I bought a ticket. I
Oh,
traveled
wow.
around the world to about 20 countries at the time. This was back in the early
Straight
2000s.
after U12.
Straight after U12. I worked in a factory for like 6 days. I worked like 10, 12-hour shifts. I just saved all of them. I had enough money to buy a house. Houses were
Back
100
then.
grand back then, yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Pulling
think...
your hair out right now.
Oh, no. No, because... So I had about 40 grand at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was plenty to buy a home. And my cousins, who are the same age as me, were buying property.
Yeah.
And they were saying, you should
so
buy
you knew.
property, you've got the money. And I thought, no, I'm like, we don't live in a war-torn country. I don't need a house. When I get married, my husband can buy it. We'll buy it together, but I'll never get the chance to travel. And so my mum was very worried, being a single girl on her own, traveling, hajaba. Like, this was before any of the social media. So sitting in a cafe alone was weird back in those days, let alone overseas.
Solo as well.
Solo,
Yeah.
completely solo. And she said, yeah, ask your dad. If your dad says yes, I say yes. And I did ask him. He said, if you got the money, go. So I got the money and I went, and she was like, oh, now I don't let you go. I've made up my mind.
She didn't expect him to say yeah.
She didn't expect him to say yes. And so I said to Dad, because, year 12, VCE, ATARs, and I said, if I do really well, I'm like, will you buy me a car or money like my friends? Like, what are you going to give me when I go overseas? It's like, I give you my permission. That's what I give you. You take that and you go. You got the money, go. You don't have the money, stay in your house. And I was like, oh. So I traveled for a year.
That's
And
a
then,
business move.
yeah, and then after I got back, it just showed me there was a whole world outside of my suburbs. So when I got back to uni, I'm like, I don't need to be fake friends with people. Like, if they want to be friends with me, I'm happy to do that. But I think that made it easier because I had such a worldly experience that when I got back, these things didn't seem like such a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of like VCE and ATAR. Like when you're, so like if an ATAR score is the aggregate of the state, then you have all of these people that you get 70% doesn't mean you got 70. It means you're on the top 30 percentile.
Sure.
So what that means is you're hanging around with a whole lot of people who, you're actually doing quite well compared to the rest of the world. Sure, among your friends, you might not be the smartest cookie, but if we zoom back in the world, you have one of the most privileged, advantaged opportunities. And I realized that when I went overseas and I saw smart people, no opportunities. In like really kind people with just so much, like so many obstacles in front of them. And I didn't have that. So when I came back, I'm like, who cares if Johnny doesn't want to be my friend or Michelle thinks like I'm not cool or I haven't got time for that. I've got a mission. Like I need to finish uni and get out of here, live my life. So I didn't have friends for the first year. It was the end of first year I started making friends and I discovered there was such thing as an Islamic society. I didn't know that. That taught me a lot of life skills. That's another story on itself. Yeah, a very interesting story. God, I wonder where those people are now. And yeah, alhamdulillah, like those friends I still have even today.
Yeah,
Muslim and non-Muslim, both.
It's actually funny because I had like a similar journey myself.
Yeah.
So when I left high school, I just thought to myself, like, I actually don't need anybody. Like,
Yeah.
I just need to be on my ones. And then a sheikh was like, in a lecture, he was just like, we're not, like the word ummah tells us that we're not meant to be on our ones, We're not supposed to be by ourselves and isolating ourselves
100%.
because the true work is actually in being in and amongst people and being of benefit to one another. And I was just like, okay, khalas.
Yeah.
I had 2 years on my ones. I'm like, now I can
Yeah.
just like, but yeah. And I feel like when you talk about your travels
Yeah.
solo,
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people in high school feel like there's this need for dependency. I remember Ali just earlier was saying, like maybe you thought to yourself, oh, I could fit in with these people because I have similar interests, or I fit in with those people because I have similar interests. It's like, okay, you'd left or you had been isolated, I think, in high school based on your religious beliefs. So then you're like, okay, I want to go on my ones solo, traveling, and then you're like, I actually don't need anyone. Like I'm not gonna die if I don't have a group of people with me.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to belong to anyone.
SubhanAllah, it's interesting you say that because for me, even though I traveled solo completely, my trip became very expensive because I didn't do any backpackers. I did hotels
Oh my
because I
God.
was traveling on my own.
And because you saved her.
And not just that, but also safety. I knew I was
yeah,
on my
true.
own. So I actually went to a backpackers for the first time. It was in Turkey where I just happened to meet someone. She seemed like such a lovely person. And back in the day, this movie had come out and I wanted to watch it and she wanted to watch it. Met her at a cafe. She's like, let's go to the cinemas and watch this movie. So we went. She said, I need to go back to my backpackers and pick something up. So I said, I'll go. And I went and I was like, oh my God. Cannot live like there's alhamdulillah I'm not in this place, right? And as in I think being female, being Muslim, being covered, like that was a factor that I needed to, you know, consider, that I would be taking taxis, that I would be doing hotels, that I wouldn't be slumming it. Like I did 3-star hotels and very cheap places and, you know, but not sharing. Like I never shared with anyone, but I was very connected. So I have a lot of family overseas as well. So I learned very quickly that when you go to a country, you meet your family at the end. Not at the beginning.
because then they'll just tie you into everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where are you going? I will take you there. And then they take you there for 15 minutes, but you spent the rest of the time with the family when you're like, but I want to spend time. Or I've been to so many shops and shopping centre. Oh, we'll take you to our local mall. I'm like, oh, we have that too. I didn't really want to do
'cause
that.
as locals as well, they're thinking like, oh yeah, this will be good, that will be good. But then you wanted, you know, a broader experience of trying everything that's new to you.
Yep. Or for example, like there'll be a park and there'll be these things I wanted to try, but there's 30 people with me and we can't try them because we can't afford it. Or, you know, or that they would send me with a couple of people, but it wasn't the same feel. So I learned really quickly that when I went into a country, I did my touring first. And then once I'd finished, I was spending 3 days a week with family and I could visit any shopping centre they wanted because I'd done everything I needed to do.
And you have a deadline as well. So you can use that deadline to be like,
I need to leave. But they feel really good about it because they send you off. They feel like they've done their duty. They don't feel as good when they're sending you off to another city. You're still in the country. If something happens to you, like, and that was a concern that, you know, a lot of people did have, like, you're by yourself, you're female, you're 18. So that was, it was interesting times. Definitely lessons learned.
Did you ever get put as the family bankroll at any stage? Did anyone nudge you and say, hey sis from Australia, the dreamland?
That can
happen. Oh,
Drop $1 million on us.
that happened before I left the country.
Bring something over.
Bring us some boxes of Panamax with you.
Well, it's so interesting you say that because the one person who was very against me traveling was my granddad, my maternal grandfather who passed away in 2021. He was against me traveling because he said, this is not okay. Your dad is a sheikh. How could he let you go? This is haram. Anyways, once he realized I was going and I bought my ticket, he sat me down and gave me life advice. And he gave me advice for traveling that I promise I still use today. It was so universal and so timeless. And one of the advice he gave me was, if you see anyone anywhere and they ask you to take a package, even if you have all the space in the world, never take it. They'll say, oh, just please for my daughter, for my family. It's like, say, I can't. And do not be shy to say, I can't. You're a girl. People will pressure you. Do not say yes. Never take a bag because what they'll do is they might put something in there and get you to carry it for them and you don't want to do that. You don't know what it is unless you pack it yourself. Don't take it. So that was his one. He gave me about 4 or 5 pieces and it worked really well. I can tell you the others.
Do you remember some of the other advice he gave?
I remember all of them because I still use them now.
Sorry, before you say that, are you related to like Pablo Escobar or something?
No.
Who's passing you packages?
Well, my granddad was a bit of a cowboy, so I dare say that his advice came from his own lived experience.
Yeah, sounds like it, yeah.
He was very open. So the first advice he gave me was to literally watch where you're going. Look where you walk. He said not everywhere is like Australia where there's beautifully cemented grounds. There's like often in countries there can be a half a metre difference between the gutter and the street. So you might be talking and chatting with someone and not looking where you go. Always watch where you're walking. Watch where you put your step. He's like, you don't know what could be underneath it. If you break your bone, no one will look after you and you'll be stuck in a city for 6 weeks. Watch where you're walking. That was his first advice. His second advice he gave to me was never look lost. And he said the way you never look, because you can tell someone who's a foreigner because they are exploring and they look like they're exploring. So he said, how do you not look lost? He said a couple of ways. First, he goes, instead of figuring out where you want to go when you're on the street, go into a shop, go look around, figure where you want to go, and then walk with purpose. And do not stop walking until
Some
you get
great
to a
advice.
destination. It's like you walk with purpose and go. You don't look at a window and a door. If you arrive at a place and you're not sure if it's this one or this one, go back into another shop or walk down the street and like have a sense of purpose. But when you arrive there, don't look like you're lost. People are local. They'll see you if you're milling around. That's the first one. The second one, he said, because this was before Uber, so people would catch just local taxis. He said, if you want to know what the real price is for something, never ask a taxi driver. Go buy a bottle of water from the local corner store and ask them. The person at the shop is too busy to be worrying about you. They'll tell you the truth. So you ask that person, say, how much would it cost to go from here to here? Where can I find that taxi? They'll tell you the price and use that as your bargaining chip when you try and figure out where you want to go. The next advice he gave me was about men. And he said, a man will never touch you by accident, ever. He's like, it is on purpose all the time. So if you're in a very busy bus and people are like bumping and someone's bumping into you and you feel weird and you feel uncomfortable, he's like, don't wait for evidence. He goes, just start shouting. He goes, start shouting, screaming, swearing if you need to. And if they don't speak it, swear at them in your own language. He's like, do not hesitate. He goes, because when a woman is screaming at a man in public, everyone turns around and looks. He goes, but if a man touches you or presses onto you and you don't know what to do and act quiet, that is someone who is an easy victim, a target, because they're not going to make noise. So he's like, men will test you. And he's like, I'm telling you this because you need to know when you go out in public. So if a man touches you or says anything to you, just start yelling and shouting at them because you need attention. And people, strangers will come to you and will help you, and that person will disappear quickly.
That's a really good rule of thumb in general, especially with our sisters taking public transport.
Yeah.
Subhanallah. That's actually very true.
That is true, yeah.
Like,
Very specific, very detailed, which I love. That and that works, like you said, timeless, but also works in probably all locations.
Yeah. And so the other advice he gave was about money. And he said, you'll be exchanging your money. He goes, you could get robbed. And he goes, it's very important that you keep some of your money on you and some of your money in another place. And when you keep the money on you, he goes, if you're robbed, prepare to give everything, but always have another stash of money somewhere else. So like the grandma style.
yeah.
You know, but he was like, you should always have like a couple of $100 so that if something happens to you, you can just pull out and use it. So this was advice before Uber, before cards, before any of that stuff. And it's still advice I use today.
Yeah, you can still use it in your own city to an extent,
Yeah.
just being more aware of your surroundings.
Watch where
people
you
around
walk, walk with purpose, make noise if someone makes you feel uncomfortable or strange. Keep your money with you. Don't take any
We've
packages.
got to invest in a sports bra, fellas.
Yeah, 100%.
You can start, show us.
So with your travels, yeah. So you're a young girl, just finished year 12, exploring the world. Did that shape some of your mind in terms of making that decision into going to psychology? And
no.
how did psychology come about?
That's a good question. So I already got into psychology and deferred studies for a year. And my family was concerned that if I deferred, I wouldn't come back. But I think it was important for me to lock something in, knowing that on my return, I've got something to start to. Psychology for me was a process of elimination, really. I knew what I liked. So I knew I liked being with people. I liked connection. I didn't want to work in an office. I wanted a job that wasn't only 9 to 5, that I could do full-time, part-time, a job that was family-friendly, that I could leave if I wanted to. Because a few of my girlfriends became engineers and struggled with that because they had a different lifestyle. So when I did that process of elimination, it ended up being 3 professions. It was, and I wanted something quick as well. So it was social worker, teacher, or psychologist. And so I didn't want to be a teacher because everyone in my family is a teacher. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So it was psychology or social work. And so with psychology and social work, one of the big differences was diagnosing. That social workers don't diagnose, psychologists do. And I thought, that would be good to have under my belt if I ever needed it. It would probably, if you can diagnose, you can probably make more money too. That's what I was thinking. And you could still have a similar lifestyle. And then I went to uni and then I just said, listen, what's the quickest course I can do to get out of here? And they said, an arts degree. And I said, what job can you get with an arts degree? And they said, oh, you can't get one. And I said, oh, so what could I go do to get a job? Oh, you could do like, I don't know, psychology or something. I was like, oh, psychology comes up again. So it was a no-brainer. I did a Bachelor of Arts, majoring in psychology and sociology. And I finished it, but I ended up being at uni for 17 years after that. So other degrees,
Really?
part-time, I collected them like stamps.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what they didn't tell me about psychology was that if you want to be an actual psychologist, you need to go back and do your post-grad. You need to do like honours level. You need to do
studies.
masters. No one told me that. So I did the 3 years, and then I ended up doing – that's a whole other story. But I ended up doing 2 postgraduate courses at the same time at 2 different unis. So I did a Master of Education and I did my postgrad in psychology.
You accumulated hex debt like nobody,
Yeah.
Funnily enough, not really.
Really?
No.
You found a way? There's a loophole?
Couple of things. I'm a lot older than you think, first of all. So the school fees were not as expensive. I think the arts degree back then was like 30 grand or something.
Wow.
That is it.
She said it's not that expensive. 30 grand would have bought her a house back then.
But that's what but compared to like
Wait,
the
isn't
the
30
fees
grand
people-
what we pay now?
Yeah, no, we pay similar to that. My master's degree was like 30 grand.
Yeah, 30
Yeah.
grand, yeah.
No, I think it was 30 for like all up when I finished all the 4 degrees.
Was 30 grand.
No, I think it was 40.
Oh,
That's good then.
That's
40,
Yeah.
45
after
or something
17
like that. Yeah.
years.
It wasn't more than 50. It never got more than 50, I'm pretty sure.
Oh my god.
How good is that 20% cut then? That 80
Yeah.
Yeah, do you benefit from that as well?
Pardon?
Do you benefit from that 20%
I
cut?
did benefit from it because I forgot about my hex debt, but it's
She
still
won.
getting paid off. But it wasn't really a big priority for me because I knew what I wanted to do. I never failed any subjects. I usually just showed up. And the other issue with hex debts is that people, because you're not paying up front, people just keep flipping and switching subjects and degrees, like, you know, not realizing they've got to pay for it. So one of the blessings I did have was that I was able to, you know, I was able to do my arts degree. And in that, I was just doing volunteering jobs and stuff that I enjoyed. And in that, I started to discover what I became good at. And a lot of my money making, if we want to say it that way, happened a lot later in life. I wasn't particularly well off when I was teens, early 20s. My friends made money quickly because they became teachers, they became engineers. So they got onto 80 grand a year, 100 grand a year, and I didn't. But for me, I think, yeah, I wasn't making money. And then once I figured out like what I was doing, I pulled 100 grand in 6 weeks. Like that's the kind of money that I was pulling in at the time because I had the skills and ability to do that.
Let me ask, was one of those things with the Oromo language?
That's right. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Because let me ask about that, yeah? How did that, first of all, come out to be? Like, where did that idea come from? And on top of that, was that why you did the Master of Education during that process as well? Did that have a part to play?
Such a good question. So Afaan also was one of those. Afaan is Afaan means language, and it's the Oromo word for language. So Oromo is the 4th most widely spoken native language in Africa. So after Hausa, Swahili, Arabic, it's Oromo. That's the next one. So that's how many people speak it. And it was banned for 100 years until 1991. And so I was born in the 80s. So the ban was active while I was learning that language from my dad verbally in Australia. And in Australia, like most people have their Greek schools, Chinese schools, they started obviously an Oromo school, but the Oromo school had 0 resources compared to the other schools I went to. So Turkish school, Arabic school, Quran school, like they've got this beautiful like content that just didn't exist for us. And so I noticed it, but didn't do much about it. But the Oromo classes were always the most fun, always the most interesting, always the most like you get the most out of it. Because they didn't have the books, they actually got everyone involved and kind of really immersed
Hands-on,
me
yeah.
into it, very hands-on. So they were teaching like songs and language and practical stuff and taking you around and not just like the book and the letters, right? And so I thought, well, I wish I could encapsulate this. And I, as a teenager, I'd do it. And they said, oh, why don't you teach the little kids Oromo? And I'm like, I don't really speak it that well. They said, who cares? You're born and raised in this country. They'll listen to you more than they'll listen to us. Just teach them what you know. And that's what I did. I just taught them my broken Oromo what I knew. I wrote down, I used a pacer, pen and paper, and just wrote workbooks, worksheets.
While speaking broken Oromo.
Yeah. So it was just like ba, cha, tokula, masari, 1, 2, 3 numbers, you know, very basic. Like you probably know the same in your language too. And the schools around the area got interested. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if I could maybe if I made this like more popular. And so at the time, I just took a photo of myself in Oromo clothing, and I just said it's my dream to make, a book for every Oromo child in every family in every home. And again, this was 15 years ago, like it got 500 likes, and I was like, oh my God, that's
Facebook?
viral. Yeah, on Facebook. That's where it was all
Good
at.
days.
Yeah, I thought 500 likes. I'm like, that's a lot of, people. So I thought, why don't I go? And at this time in my life, I'd already finished my degree. I'd already traveled, remember? But what happened was I actually had a really bad relationship breakdown. So I was married. I got married, very short-lived, and then that marriage ended, and I was devastated. Like when I say devastated, like capital letters, underline, italic, whatever. It was bad. And it was bad because I think as a young Muslim woman at the time, being born and raised in Australia, I had the opportunity to do whatever I wanted to do, and I didn't. I really stayed to the path of my community, my faith, my family. I got married. And in my mind, I thought, if you do all the right things, then of course you're going to have a successful marriage. No, that's not the case. You can do all the right things. And if it's not your nasib, it's not meant to be. So within, and again, I often don't talk about, my marriages. This is my third marriage I'm in at the moment. So I've been married twice before. And I never spoke about them because I think couple of reasons. One is because whenever you have a relationship with a man, there's two sides to the story all the time. And, it's just my chance, my opportunity that I'm the one who's in the public space and I have microphones and people asking me questions. So I can say whatever I want about these men, but where's their microphone? Where's their opportunity to respond back? What if they have things to say that are legit? For whatever reason it is. And so I never wanted to impinge on their haqq in that sense. So I never spoke about them, ever. Not good, not bad, not even alluding to them, just silence, complete silence. And that silence didn't mean that I was heartbroken or devastated. You think as a young Muslim woman, you leave your country, you go to another country to marry someone, have a wedding, and within 12 weeks you're back in Australia, basically divorced. Yeah, that's not easy for any female, right? And so I thought, that's it. I'm lost. I'm not going to do anything. Part of my plan when I went overseas was thinking, well, maybe I might do this book thing. That was, something to do because I'm not going to be working. And then when I got back, I poured all my heartbreak really into Afaan. And so from that, what I said was, because I wanted to travel again, and my family was encouraging, and I thought, you know what, let's see if this story exists anywhere else in the world. So I just went to 9 different countries for the purpose of meeting Oromo communities. Wow. Literally went there, contact who's the community? I want to meet their leaders. I'm filming a documentary, and I'm just filming and I got my camera and I got DSLRs back then and all the mics and stuff. And I went to 9 communities and I just documented people's experiences with the identity.
Were you in the process of writing a book as well?
At the time, yes. Yeah. So I'd already had my notes, but I thought, if I wanted to share this with people, people need to hear the stories.
I wanted to ask, obviously 9 different places. What's the weirdest place that you found the Oromo community had migrated
unexpected.
to?
Norway.
Really? Norway sounds pretty.
A lot of Somalis there.
Yeah. Scandinavian countries. You walk around and there are no Oromos or Somalis or anyone when you walk in, and they're we don't have hairdressers in this country. And I was you don't not black ones. I was right. So I thought Norway was real because it's snowing and it goes against the climate of where Oromos would traditionally go to. So that was probably the most surprising. They were also the most vibrant, the most active, and the most committed. Wow. And so they called me back again because their community was so small. They're no, we've got work to do. So they were part of my documentary. And so I met people who liked their identity, who didn't like their identity, who were confused by their identity, who wanted to do it but felt put back by their community. And I just documented it all, stories. And so when I came back, I had all these stories that I actually edited into 1 to 2 minute series. And then I had the quotes or how much everything, it cost me about 50 grand, what I needed really, with economies of scale and everything. So what I did was I got some advice from people in our community, and I'm like, I don't have money, but my community's got money. I don't have the language, but there's people who have language. So I leveraged what I didn't have for what I did have. And because I did so much community work with organizations like Benevolence and Young Muslims of Australia and Islamic Council of Victoria and things like that, I was able to do things at a postgraduate level because we were organizing camps, we were organizing, you learn about, budgeting, logistics, asking for quotes, objection handling, all of that stuff, you learn about it. So when I got advice, I ended up saying to people, okay, this is my community. I said, if you want to help me, there's something in it for everyone. This is my story. And it was 6 minutes and I paid these guys to do it because I'm like, I'm too tired to edit.
Yeah.
And the man said, we will do a short reel for $5,000. And I was like, that's a lot of money.
A 6-minute reel for 5,000.
I'm like, that's a lot of money. And he was like, yep. He's like, but how much money do you want to raise? I said, 50. Because what if I told you this 6-minute video will raise you 50 grand? Would it be worth it?
Good question.
I said, you know what? It would be. So I paid him 5 grand. That was a lot of money for me starting out and everything. So I paid him 5,000. He told my story in 6 minutes. And I used that video and I released it to the community. And so before that video, what I did was I released a short video saying, I'm going to launch something and I want you to hear about it. And I feel like all this social media stuff, but I did it 15 years ago. And I said, I want to fundraise in 4 weeks. I need $50,000. You can either like and share so people know what I'm doing. You can contact me with your talent because I need designers and things like that. Or you can host a fundraiser. So if you don't have host a fundraiser, I will send you all the merch. Just host it and share around with what you've got. And if you want to do that, you need to contact me in 2 weeks. 25 cities got in touch in that 2 weeks saying we will host a fundraiser. They'd never heard of such thing. The language wasn't banned anymore, but nothing existed for children. And they're like, if you're willing to do the effort, and I showed the evidence, here's stuff that I've made. I'm willing to do I just need fundraising. And our community didn't believe in GoFundMe. They didn't believe in credit cards back in those days. So that's why hosting the fundraiser. And I also did, I think it was possible, you can donate online or host a fundraiser. So 25 cities got in touch. And then by the end of the 2 weeks, 12 cities were confirmed and booked with events and locations, and I couriered stuff off. And so in 1 month, 12 cities started their events, and that's once every 2 days. So you imagine how much content is coming out, how much people are sharing. So the first city was Egypt. They contacted me, the refugee community. I said, we have no money. We actually can't fundraise for you. Can you just send your merch and we'll just do a really big party? And also, can you send money to hire the place? And can you they wanted me to pay for it basically, but I was like, you know what? He's willing to do it. I'm like, how much do you need? It's like $500. We can do it for $500. And I was like, well, I'll send you $500. Don't worry about it. So I sent him $500. And they said, we want to do it because we want to set the scene. We can't be the Minnesota. We can't be like those cities. So we did that. And when I went to, so they organized me on Skype because this was before COVID. And I opened it and 500 people showed up.
My goodness.
500. I burst into tears and they were like, I think she's crying. When you see everyone, because I couldn't believe it. I was like, in my early 20s, and I was like, oh my God, this is I wasn't expecting this. And so the content sharing from that, everyone in America sat up tall. They were like, oh, if the refugees did this, and so the competition kicked off. And I think the most money that was raised technically was Melbourne. Melbourne raised $50,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in the 6 weeks, we raised 120 something thousand. Oh, wow. And so every day we were counting down with all these stories that I'd filmed from all over the world. So there were Norwegians, Germans, Americans, New Zealanders, and so people were like, where did this girl go to get all these stories that Oromo communities were never connected around the world? And so I said, whoever raises the most money, I'm going to do a world tour and travel to those countries and give them my books. And I did that afterwards. So after I raised the money, I printed it. So for our community, it was not only did she bring our stories, bring the beauty of what we have, took something so painful, made it so good. She comes from a family where her mother doesn't even speak the language. Her father does. How did she learn the language and start, advocating and, so it was almost like a revolution in that sense. And people ended up, and she delivered. And so finally, you know, when eventually there was an Oromo prime minister who came into the country, which drama happened afterwards, but let's stick with the start part, right? At the time, he'd become prime minister, and you know,
huge.
yeah, it was huge. And he went around apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Come back to the country." And people came, and so for the first time in 150 years, they did a Thanksgiving ceremony. And
Was the ban lifted? Wow.
and I was invited as a guest to come. So I met the president of the country. They said,
Wait,
"What do you?"
formally by the president?
Yeah. The president of Oromia.
amazing.
Shout out to
I
you.
went with Dad. And so you can imagine for
Oh, you must have
him,
loved
This
that.
full circle moment.
full circle. So,
Yeah.
and you know, 7 million people showed up to the Thanksgiving. I was there.
Wow.
When the country did the guest of honor, I was there on the stage with the president of Oromia as well. And, you know, and he
So
was
now,
like,
at this point, has the vision changed from what it originally set out to be?
no, because the vision was a book for every Oromo child in every family in every home. Now we've come to the motherland. So he said, "What do you want?" And I said exactly that. And he said, "Whatever you want, you can have. What do you need? Channels, airtimes?" Like I said, "I need your Department of Education. I need to meet with the minister. We need to get together." And he called the minister and is like, "Wherever you are, come down and meet with her." And he did. And so what I did with him is I had a mascot. It made him my character. And I met him at the hotel, and my mascot showed up as well. And the whole hotel was like, "Oh my God." So the mascot was cheering and happy, clapping with everyone. And then I had my videos and I had my books. And he came with his like assistant minister or something. And then he was very quiet in the meeting. But then he just said, "I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've never seen this kind of quality." He's like, "I'll be honest with you, this is not very relevant to us because we have our own curriculums and stuff." He goes, "But what you have done, we need to team up. Bring your team, bring my team. Let's sign MOUs. Let's get started."
So, sorry to cut you. How did that feel? Just being in your mid-20s, you're in the same room as the president,
Yeah.
of course, with your dad alongside you. You said 7 million people. How's your thought process in terms of like impact you can make or someone else could make in terms of not just your culture, but just anything you put your mind to?
If I take you back to the story of heartbreak, which is when I felt like I was completely deserted, ghosted, treated like nothing, felt like I didn't have any value, and I poured everything into that. There was part of me that was like, "Yara, when is justice going to happen? When am I going to be seen for who I am and what I did?" I did nothing wrong in my mind. He may disagree, but this is me on the podcast. So I'm saying from my perspective, right? But I took it to Allah. And I said, I could have, I could have been malicious. I did have a following at the time. I could have said things. I could have done. I really did nothing. And I said, "Ya Rabbi, leave it to you." And in 8 years, full circle. Wow. And I felt like at that point, how else could have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shown me? What do you want?
Yeah.
And so it was very emotional for my dad. It was emotional for me, not because look what I did, but it was more like, oh, cool, this is what can happen when I wasn't wedded. I had a profession on the other side at home, by the way. This was just a side hobby that was happening. It wasn't like I worked for this for my whole life. But I think what happened was, and the thing is, I needed security detail. I couldn't walk on the streets. And when there was like one channel in the country and they were featuring me live and I was talking live on TV. So people knew me on the streets. I couldn't do shopping. I couldn't go out. I was like, when I went to the airport, there was like 200 people with my face on their T-shirts.
In your native language?
Yeah.
Wow.
Waiting to meet me and stuff like that. They had big banners out, rolling red carpets. It was wild. Yeah, it was nothing like in Australia. I'm not very known.
I think it's crazy to go from speaking broken Oromo. Oromo.
Yeah.
Oh, is the language Oromo too?
Yeah, Afaan Oromo or Oromo. Yeah.
Okay, from speaking broken Oromo to teaching it to the kids, then coming out with this project, and then being in your home country, speaking on live TV in that same language. On that sort of question, yeah, and with your vision with this project. Do you think living in a Western country, having dual heritage, even for us, being Somali and Australian, Lebanese and Australian, there's a certain point where it dies out, like your parents' ethnicity?
So the way I think of it, I think language is so important in the way we use language. And when, people come to colonize you, the first thing they take away is your language. So, for me, Afaan was an inherently spiritual exercise because, if Allah created us to get to know one another, then protecting what he gave you is also an act of worship. So you'll never find anything religious or political on my books ever. But for me, it was a religious exercise. Like protecting the language, was really important to me. And I think your identity is what you make of it. And so the fact that, like now, for example, I'm married to a man from a completely different heritage. My children aren't as fluent as me. I don't want to put that pressure on them, that people put pressure on their children. And, I would love for my children to learn. Even when I went back to the country, like I asked the minister, so like he said, what's your specialty? And I said, lower elementary, prep to grade, 2, 3, 4. I said, and what's your numbers? And he's like, we've got 1.3 million registered students. So I was like, God, I think I want to retire on this. Like, that's what I was thinking. But I learned the biggest lesson. The country descended into civil war after that. And so what we have in Australia is opportunity. And I didn't say as I have opportunity to let me do that. I have an opportunity, which means an obligation, that I have to share what I have so other people can build themselves up too. The language wasn't mine. The language was rich and built without me. And so when I put it on that platform, I didn't say, hey, look at me. I was like, hey, look at this story. Look at this story. Look at that story. I gave mics to people for people to tell their own stories. And so my email was flooded with people crying. Even people meet me now in person in the random village in the middle of nowhere. Like, oh, yeah, we know you. You're the girl who did the language thing at the very least. My sister lives in the UAE. It was funny when I did my campaign. She doesn't look Oromo, but some of her colleagues knew. So one of her colleagues came to her and said, hey, listen, look, I know you're not into your Oromo stuff, but you've got to get onto this. There's this girl in Australia. She's dual, right? And she's doing this campaign. It's called Afaan. I'm going to send you a link. Yeah. And my sister's like, oh, yeah, what's her name? She's like, Toltu Tufa. And she's like, yeah, that's my sister. So my sister's like, oh, it's spreading. She's like, I'm hearing about it at work. So I think your identity will never, like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans something for you, you need to have certainty. The certainty wasn't in my identity. The certainty was Allah will look after me. And that was such a personal, private exercise as a woman, as a Muslim woman, that, how does that relate to heartbreak and relationships? I didn't sit there saying, Ya Rab, I did the right thing by you. So I need you to make sure that 7 million people are waiting in 8 years' time and my dad's clapping for me. And I was just like, I leave it to you. And if you think about the stories that exist in our own tradition, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam left it to Allah and was boycotted out of his country. He was ditched and ghosted and treated like crap, and Taif and Mecca. Forget Taif, Mecca, that was his home base. He gave his all. He did nothing but good. And so I felt a lot of myself in that story. So when he got kicked out, what happened 10 years later? He came back and, he came back to rule. And so, at that point, it didn't matter what his story was. And I think that was so profound and inspiring. And I think even today in 2025, it can still inspire people, including myself.
Yes, there's a lot of, I would say, there's a lot of hikmah in allowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make those decisions for you rather than enforcing what you believe is your right, your justice or whatever it is from that situation, subhanAllah.
Without giving up. Without giving 100%. Up. Not being like, that's it, I'm done and dusted. Allah needs to figure it out for me.
Yeah, I feel like I just wanted to circle back to the question that I think Abdiwali was trying to ask, if I'm not mistaken. I know that there's a lot of cultures. Obviously, Islam's a very colorful religion, subhanAllah. There's a lot of different colors, a lot of different cultures, and mashallah, like that's the beauty of it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can't hear? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kind of tells us to, mix, like see each other from where we're coming from and to take from one another. And I feel like there's a bit of a stress to preserve culture. I don't know, certain nationalities, certain people, certain tribes, whatever it may be, subhanAllah. I just wanted to get your take on that and obviously like you're yourself a product of a mixed relationship, subhanAllah. And then obviously look at what you've done for that culture in particular, subhanAllah, the Afaan Oromo language. Yeah.
It's such a good question because when we think about preserving our culture, we think about exclusivity. Sometimes we move to excluding people to make ourselves like amazing, but how do you know that's not the secret to dying out? Because we know if we bring it to language, we know that in the next 50 years, half of the languages will be died off in this world. There are so many languages that are just dying away really quickly. And so the best way is to practice, and the best way to practice is to immerse, and the best way to immerse is to mix and be involved. And so does that mean, if you look at the Arabic language in its purity, it is diluted in so many different ways and caused it to be an even more rich language because there's so many different types of Arabs, right? That's just the Arabic language. The same with Oromo. There's so many different dialects. Even in my books, I would do a whole page saying we are one language with several dialects, and it's actually a reflection of the beauty that we have, that we can be so different. And I think for families where racism is real and it exists, and they're like, my daughter's too good for this person, or my son's too good for that girl, and so on, I think it comes back to, when we're preserving language, what's the intention behind that? If it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then don't worry about it, because Allah will look after you. But if you center yourself as the most powerful one to do that, then I guess good luck to you. And I think if I go back to my parents, so my mum was Turkish, and a lot of Turkish families at the time were very against her marriage to my dad. She was, in their mind, young and beautiful, and why would she be married to this black man who's a refugee? And I think what made it so easy was my mum's family was supportive, specifically my granddad, Allah yarhamu. He was not racist at all. And so when he got a whiff that my dad thought racism, because my granddad did reject and refuse, not reject, rather he explained all the reasons why my father shouldn't marry my mum. And my dad took that as a rejection, a polite rejection. And when my granddad found that out, he cried and said, no, I'll give you my daughter if that's the case. And he said, it's my daughter. I don't want to force her to get married. I forced my older daughter. I don't want to do that with this one. So it was up to mum. And mum told us that she spoke to dad and said, look, what do you think? Because there were other men who were interested at the time and proposing. And he said, I actually think that this man, Abdul Wahab, is the good one. And mum was like, why? And he said, well, he's always at the mosque. He's leading the community. I see the other men, where they go. My granddad's one that speaks his mind. He's like, I see where they go, what they do, where they show up. And this man, and he seems patient. He doesn't get angry quickly. And he's also, if he's a sheikh and he fears God, then maybe this is the one for you. So she said, I took it in mind, and eventually she went with that. But because faith was so fundamental, I'm telling you, there were lots of cultural weird moments between my parents, and like mom taking this Oromo guy who doesn't know Turkish culture, or Turks believe in hospitality in the same way Oromos do, but it shows up differently. And Turkish people who are like, oh my God, what is this? It's not Turkish. And
Do you have a brother?
I do.
Okay. Did he have the circumcision party?
He didn't.
Because that one for me was always hilarious.
It was like, what's a circumcision? So the Turkish people have this culture where they circumcise males, not when they're born, not when they're 1 or 2. They wait until they're about 7 or 8, older. And then what they do is they circumcise them. And then they have this massive party.
To let everyone know.
Or when I say party, I mean like a reception.
Yeah.
Like, and they dress him. Yeah, they dress him with a crown, and they put a big a cape on him, and they call it sunnet.
That's such a Turkish thing.
Because it's a sunnah of the Prophet to get it done. And so they take that sunnah and just up to the next level. So no, my brother didn't have that. Yeah. He didn't have that party.
I was just saying, subhanAllah, you're like, okay, yeah, like there's this culture, like there's a culture clash, subhanAllah, between obviously your father and your mother, and trying to interlock, the good things from both cultures, subhanAllah. That's what I think is brilliant about the like relationships between like people from different cultures.
And my mum's an amazing woman too. Like, honestly, I think she had so much respect for my dad. She genuinely believed him to be like a man of God. So she was cool. And, she got involved in the community when others haven't. It's been more than 40 years. She's still involved in the community. And people say, oh, what about her Turkish side? But she worked in Turkish schools for so long. So she had her fix during the day. And I think if you speak to her, she has said in the past, a lot of it is that she had that respect, and he had that respect back. He didn't try and push her, force her. I'm sure if she came home and said, we're doing a sunnet party, he would just be like, well, I guess we're doing a sunnet party. Yeah. I don't like it, but we just do it when they're born, really quickly. So, without all the fanfare. But again, that's culture difference. And we have differences not just with culture, but even financially. When you marry different of a different financial status, attitudes to money are different. Do you know what I mean? When you marry people with different education, attitudes towards education can be different as well. So it's not just culture. There's other things as well, I think, that can be make or break relationships. But if we're able to bring faith, and when we say what is faith, is it La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah? Yeah, that's the common thread. But faith is character. So when you have good character, that's when the cultural clash happens. That's when faith helps. Not saying I have iman, I believe in Allah, and I'm going to throw this stick at you and be like, astaghfirullah al-azim for everything you've done wrong. It might actually be, you know what? It's the character that's going to get us through. And character was what my granddad fell in love with, and character is what my mum continues to enjoy about dad. And character is what I love most in my husband right now. So character, I think, is so important and almost overrated as well by, social media.
But, even within culture, you're talking about the differences, finance, education, culture. Even within culture, you can still have like differences. But the differences may not be between like the husband and wife. This was somewhat what I was alluding to before. But the differences between generations, So like, for example, if the older generation speak fluently, and then let's just say the grandchildren come along down the line, grandchildren can't speak to their grandparents, maybe the children speak to their parents in a broken tongue.
Yep.
And then there's that disconnect between, and I sort of see it a lot nowadays, because we'll talk about this with an episode in terms of what's going on with the youth nowadays coming back from immigrant households and stuff.
Yeah.
And we came to the conclusion a big part of it is respect. Because we respected our parents. We had that some level of shyness, that fear and stuff. Yep. But I feel like that came from that connect through language and that similarity between culture. Whereas now there's a massive disconnect between the parents and their children in the household. And that comes from the fact that the kids feel as if the parents don't understand them. They won't get me. So then there's that that rebellion that goes and occurs, So, I just wanted to make that point as well with language, like how important it is as well. And in a way, I believe most languages in the West will somewhat die out if it isn't for the works of what you did like with Afaan as well,
I think English is the international language, but for how long?
Yeah.
What about Mandarin? What about Spanish? What about Arabic? These are also very big. What about Hindi? There are big language, big contenders that maybe for the next 100 years it might be, English, but who knows after that?
And even from like a sense of belonging as well. Like if you say to yourself, hey, I'm Turkish, hey, I'm Lebanese or Somali, then you go to Somali and you can't speak the language, or you go to Oromo and you can't speak Oromo, then in a way, are you?
Yeah, you feel like you're not one of them, or you feel like an outsider.
Yeah, correct.
Automatically. Because even with me, like my parents, you probably know. So my mum didn't learn much Afrikaans, and like she learned at school, but then afterwards it was never really taught, and was never even encouraged for myself, even though I'm half South African, because it's like, oh, that's like the Dutch language, or so called, as
the foreigner language,
the white man language.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no need to learn that. You should maybe learn like Arabic. But then if you're living in a household that's quite mixed, you kind of struggle with learning the language, and then you go back home and you feel like an outsider. Like Willie said, it's like, am I actually one of them? So that's where it's like trying to preserve the language, but then being a bit realistic with yourself as well in terms of expectation. I
think so. You should be realistic with yourself. Even with Afaan, I did what I did, and people were always like, what's next? More. And the reality is there's a lot that I did want to do, and I haven't started that for lots of reasons. And part of me wonders if maybe I should just leave it as it is, and I've done what I've done. I could pursue it as a whole, career, but there are so many other, aspects and dimensions of my life. And I think the important part is that we try not to shut it down.
Completely, yes.
Yeah, just
Agreed.
It's okay. You may speak the language, you may not. It's like, in Ethiopia, it's the same. So the working language is Amharic, which is kind of what you're talking about, Afrikaans. And so there's the majority language, which is Oromo. And there are many, many indigenous languages, in within the country, even across to Kenya and Sudan and, and so on, Somalia too. I think the big thing is that the issue, particularly with Oromo, was that it was literally tried to be exterminated. It was enshrined in the law that we don't speak the language. That's the problem.
Oh, wow.
So people say, oh, well, do you believe people should speak Amharic? I'm like, absolutely. But not at the expense of Oromo. So I think you should learn English, yes, not at the expense of your own language. And, that's a journey that, we need to reclaim, I think, for us. We're just taught that, you know, go for this and go for that, and then you don't realize what you're losing until it's gone.
Yeah,
That's
because you have
even-
no sense of identity. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That's even interesting when it comes to parenthood. When it comes to like, it's like, oh, are you going to speak to your kid in Arabic? Because, for example, my wife's Pakistani and she's going to speak Urdu.
So is my husband.
So then there's Urdu, yeah? So then it's like, okay, they're obviously their culture, they're very strong with keep preserving the language. So it's like, okay, I'm going to speak to the kid in Urdu. But then it's like, you're trying to find that balance with English and Urdu or even my language, Arabic.
I have a question for you. Do you reckon that kid, or your kid, sorry, that kid,
That kid over there.
Just call it it.
Yeah.
would ever be like proficient in Urdu or
I think
Arabic or something like that? Like they'll probably understand it from the parent side of things. But
yeah. I think more Urdu. Like, so it depends on how many people are speaking to them and how often. So, for example, my in-laws, they speak at home anyway. They don't speak in English.
Yeah.
And then my wife's obviously fluent in terms of speaking and understanding, but when it comes to reading and writing, maybe a bit different.
Yeah.
Whereas my household, I learned Arabic from like 20 years old onwards.
Yeah.
So it's not really a native tongue for myself, and
Yeah.
it's classical Arabic. So that's where it's like, it's a bit more effort for me compared to my in-laws. It's just, they speak as is.
Send them 2-3 years, they understand.
Exactly. That'll work.
That works.
But for me, the thing that made me laugh the most was like when we were like obviously in the phase of trying to figure out who we're going to marry, how we're going to marry, whatever it is. SubhanAllah, always when I had conversations with people, they would always say to me, okay, say you're in public, yeah, and you're with your partner, your spouse, whatever, and you see some wild stuff. You try to nudge them, but you speak English out loud, and you're like obviously speaking about that person, and then they're going to be able to connect the dots.
Exactly.
Like, hang on, you're talking about me.
Yeah.
It's like, but I want to be able to speak in my own language to my wife if I see some crazy stuff going on,
Yeah.
because I don't want that person to find out.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just like, that's the dumbest thing. So you're going to risk having an absolutely...
So you can gossip.
So you can gossip.
Yeah.
And also, like, the better you get to know your wife, the eyes talk. You just
That's
one
true.
look and they're like, it says everything. Like, the eyes talk. You can just look at your partner and look at the situation. They already know everything, especially if they know you so well. They know the things that you're looking at that get your attention, right? So, yeah, the eyes have it.
The funniest was, my wife's Egyptian and I'm Lebanese.
Yeah.
You would think we speak Arabic together.
Dear God.
Wallahi, it's the funniest thing. I'd be like to her, what? What are you talking about? Oh my God, I said the most simple thing in the world. And then she's
She still didn't get it.
You're not speaking Arabic.
Yeah.
You made up a language.
Yeah, Vesha, you know? I'm like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
It's completely different.
100%.
And that's like Mr. Ammi, yeah?
yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Imagine.
So different.
I think we lived through a very interesting time recently. I think it would have been about, for the past maybe 3-4 years, we had a bit of a divide between a certain community. We'd like to call them the red pill community.
Okay.
And then we also had the opposite side of the spectrum, which
Blue
is...
pill?
We'll call it blue pill. Let's
Okay.
call it blue pill.
Right.
We like I said, like we had that very interesting time where people of that orientation started to really find their voice in the community and start perpetrating certain things about what they think relationships should be like, gender, relations, and so on and so forth. I just wanted to get, as somebody from obviously the realm of expertise when it comes to just relations between men, women, and relationships in general. What was your take on everything that occurred?
I think what happens is sometimes we can get caught up in semantics and what people say. And I think what's most important is to understand people's frame of reference. Why are they saying what they're saying? And that's the most important thing. And so when you look at there's two things to look at. One is, what is that person's frame of reference? Why are they saying what they're saying? And then what is the outcome of that? And I think those are the two things that we can judge and be clear on what our criteria is for whether you agree or disagree. So for example, if someone says something like, I think a woman should stay at home and that's her job and that's all she should be doing and she should serve me 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? The question would be, well, what's the frame of reference? Give me some... the content doesn't mean anything to me, to be honest. It's the context. What are we talking about? Does she want to do that? Is that what she's interested in? Is she encouraged to do that? Is she being harmed in that process? Does she have another option? Is she being demeaned or belittled? Is she standing in her light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created her in? They're the questions I'd be asking. So what's the frame of reference? That would be the first one. And the second one is, what is the impact of doing that? So it might work for your situation, but it might not necessarily work for others. And so sometimes, when people say certain things, it's about recognizing, some of it might be to get clout. And so when it comes to getting clout, we need to get down to the root bottom of it. And there are people who speak to that very, very pointedly. And I'm someone that's not fearful of doing that too. So, when a man has certain beliefs, beliefs can always be challenged. Beliefs can be changed. And I think it's important to give people context more than content. So sure, someone can be saying, 1 + 1 is 2. But if you've been 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, it might not equal 2 anymore. So, you think about two people wielding a knife. One of them you really like and the other one you don't, because one's a surgeon and one is a thief. So context matters, and the outcome of what happens also matters. If a doctor did surgery on you and as a result you had a catastrophic consequence, you might be angry and upset and bad, but you're kind of understanding of where it happened. You might not hold a demonstration against that doctor. You might just do a lawsuit. But if someone raided your home and came with a machete and started and cut you even slightly, the impact of that is different because the context is different too. So when we talk about relationships, we need to be really careful that we're not just focused on content, but we're focused on context, because that's what Islam is for us too. As from a faith-based perspective, the whole reason we don't just have Quran, we don't just believe in Quran, we believe in Sunnah, because Sunnah is context. Quran is content, and Hadith and the Sunnah is context. It's why when people go to the Prophet ﷺ and said, advise me, and the Prophet says, you don't be angry, you need to brush your hair. This way it would look better on you than someone else. Does that mean a good Muslim is a well-combed man, a man with well-combed hair, groomed, who, maybe has a flat pack and who, never gets upset? No, that's not what Islam is. It's context. It's based on that particular person. So I think context is important and usually missing from a lot of social media and the pills that you take.
Yeah, because our society can be quite divided at times, and especially over COVID, you see people over consuming these days. And I've got to give credit to you for talking about these certain taboo topics.
Yeah.
How's that been with beginning, speaking about these topics, and any backlash or even just responses from the community?
So again, I think in terms of the work I do, I've never actually received backlash.
Okay,
ever. I think people have been more curious about what I'm doing. And I think, again, context is really important as well. And I think the work I've been doing has come on good timing. I think I've always been in this area of work, but I've never packaged it this way. So when we talk about taboo topics, I went to an Islamic school. I was raised in a conservative family. Both of my parents were open to talking about relationships, and I think a lot of Muslim families are open to talking about sex and sexuality, but they just don't use those words. They're very Western white words. We have other words in our language, like marriage, like getting to know one another, like how you should be dressed, and spending your parents spend a lot of money on how they dress you and what they choose to dress and how they think you should be spending your time in community, expectations of behavior. A lot of these relate to sexuality, and we celebrate sex within a realm or within a framework. And so for most of, people that we know, that's the framework of Islam. So we celebrate weddings like nobody's business. We celebrate childbirth, which is a product of having sex, right? So we do have that in our culture, but what happens is our culture has created such beauty around the way it's talked about that we're comfortable with it. So when we bring different cultures together and there are serious and real problems, and people have worked on it and they're like, well, we've worked on it. This is best practice and evidence. You need to now start doing this. We're like, whoa, hang on. We don't even say that word. That's not spoken about. And so it can be really hard. And so I noticed that when I was growing up that, in my family it was spoken about, like not very like, hey, I'm going to bring a boyfriend home. But if the topic needed to come up, they weren't particularly shy about it, especially my mum when it came to like educating us. And I think when we grew older, even dad was like, are you seeing anyone? Like, is there anyone who you're getting to know? Like, I'd rather know from you than from someone else. If I hear from someone else, we're going to have problems. But if I hear it from you, it's going to be different. so do you have a boyfriend? Like, that sort of.
That is very open though, yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was open in a lot of ways, interestingly. But he was very, I don't know if he was open. I wouldn't call my dad an open person. He was clear.
Yeah.
He was very clear about where he stood,
Yeah.
not necessarily open. And again, this understanding was really good for me because I grew up with a clear parent. I grew up in a non-Muslim school where we had sex education. I grew up in not in a Islamic school where there was the only sex education we had was you need to take ghusl like before praying, and they wouldn't even tell you properly about praying, and like it was just weird. And then the reality is that the trajectory of my life, so when I came back from uni, finished uni, one of the first proper paid job I got was being a project manager and creating educational programs, like ironically. And so that was preventing sexual assault. That was my work. So it was sexual assault prevention work for secondary schools, in particular for year nines and 10s. So I was involved in developing the program, and long story short, I won government awards for doing it. So I was able to talk to schools, to convince schools to get people on board, and within 18 months from like 3 or 4 schools, we went to 13 schools with 22 schools on a wait list.
Wow.
So I was able to communicate how important this was. And in that time, I was Muslim practicing, muhajjab. It was weird because I'd be in class and be like, but miss, are you a virgin? So are you allowed to teach us this subject? Like they'll ask you because you're dealing with non-Muslims, right? And they know.
Yeah.
So they know. So I became accustomed to sort of these conversations anyway. And then once I left that job, part of me realized I couldn't work it any further because they just had a different framework that wasn't aligned necessarily with Islam and not to say that they wouldn't let, it's just the framework was different. So I was saying things like, can we put this in a Muslim school and call it like a marriage course? Because, sexual assault and sexual abuse is serious and it's a prevention program. So it's before the problem starts, and they're like, oh, no, we need to talk about sex. And I thought, well, why don't we talk about marriage? And then it's up to them if they choose to do it before they get married, but at least they have the skills. And they were like, no, we need to, we can't change the language. And so I've realized this is like, even though they had good intentions, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that, to be fair. I'm just like, it is what it is, moved on with my life.
Because they obviously, their goal isn't marriage. They don't.
No.
They're just telling them, hey, like protection.
But the thing is, right, if we talk about, so marriage is the framework, but they're looking at the behavior, so sexual behaviors, healthy behaviors, but we have those same behaviors, we have those same relationships, but just in a different framework. And so because I wasn't higher up in the pecking order, I didn't have that influence. So I left it and I was okay with that, but I got such good experience.
Yeah.
And then when I became a psychologist formally, like maybe 15 years later, I started to become very exposed to victim survivors. So people who'd actually gone through traumatic experiences. And so I did therapy with them and worked with them in private practice and in clinic. And also one of the other areas is in my internships when I was getting ready to get my full license, all of my electives, all of my work experience was in forensics.
Wow.
All of it. So I worked in prisons, I worked for the government, and I specialized in treating people that have been convicted of sexually harming others.
Wow.
That wasn't the only people I dealt with. That was it for years.
I think, and obviously you can probably speak to it better than I can because you're the expert, subhanAllah, like how much of it can you especially these offenders, how much of it can you link towards an addiction towards certain adult films? And yep. So there's definitely a component of that for some people. I wouldn't say it's the case for everyone. And when we talk about people convicted of harming, we think movies, we think predators, we think, all sorts of labels. And I think when you enter it through the work I did, you start to see a much more broader spectrum. There are people with disabilities who don't understand social cues and get themselves in tight situations. There are people who have different cultures and don't understand some things are right and some things are wrong. There are some people who are raised in families where it happened to them and they don't know how to distinguish. So it's not always, and then you get your human traffickers, and then you get your people who, so it's a very mixed bag, like let's say. And I guess my role and what I was trained for at the time was to I was trained to assess risk of recidivism. So what that means in plain English is my job is nothing to do with when they're in court. My job was,
Once they've been convicted and sentenced to a corrections order, to a prison sentence, to going on a registry, that is when I start to see them. That's when their file would come to my table. So the question that was asked of me, or the referral question for the psychologist, is what is the likelihood that this person will offend again? That's the question they want answered.
Repeated offenders. Yeah.
Yep. So and what's the the categories that they have with the psychometric tools is like low, medium, high, and then based on, so you need to interview these. So you read all the collateral about them, you interview them for often up to about 6 hours, and then after that you do all the testing you need to do in the background, and then you come up with a rating, and then based on that rating you make treatment recommendations, and so that I guess makes the assessment, and then there's the treatment. So I'd also do treatment. So there'd be groups, so group work, and actually working through, men, predominantly men. There are some women as well, but vast majority are men, and working in these cases. So what that did was that taught me again another perspective. So I had the prevention, where people just have no idea, going about their day-to-day life, wanting to start a relationship, the you and I's. Then I dealt with working with people who actually experienced it as a victim, as a survivor. And then I dealt with people who were not just getting away with it, but were caught and were, doing their sentences and so on. So in that experience, it was really interesting for me, because I thought, oh, wow, I'm just learning so many things. Didn't think it was particularly special what I was learning. But when I started going into community and people would say things, I would say things back. I would be like, like these people, how do we protect our kids from them? And I'm like, you don't protect your children from them. You just need to teach your children healthy, you need to just teach your kids. And what do we teach them? Well, it starts with you. Well, what do we do? Well, first, if your child tells you something, believe them. You need to believe your kids. These people are banking on your child's silence and secrecy, and they'll weaponize it.
Call them out on it, yeah?
As in, if your child tells you something's happened, believe them.
Believe them, yeah.
Believe them. Believe them, and then follow. If your child's telling you something's up, and as a parent, especially if you're a child or a teenager, there could be so many scenarios, but that's one example, right? Believe them if they've told you. Now, what happens is that I started giving more and more advice, and people were like, oh my God, that's amazing. I didn't think it was amazing. I just thought, well, you need to know this. This is basic, not rocket science 101. And then subhanAllah, I was actually especially doing a lot of professional work in other areas, but then I had a couple of things happen. A parent coach came up to me and she said, oh, I'd love to do a reel with you. Can you give the top 4 tips you'd give to parents given the work that you've done? I'm like, sure. And then boom, within a day, 60,000 people saw that. And I'm like, that's interesting. Then the other one that comes up very frequently is pornography. And the reason why I say that is because now it's so much more accessible that a lot younger children have access to it. So parents don't know how to deal with it. They just keep protecting their children, hoping they never see it. And then when they do see it, not know how to deal with it. So I was like, oh, this is my area. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to post a video on what to tell your kids. I'll tell people what I told my own children from the age of 3. Don't need to use the P word if you want to say, but you can certainly teach your children about it.
From 3 years old, do you think?
100%. Well, I recommend people the first time to talk to your children is when you give them an iPad, a device. That's when you start talking.
Fair enough.
First time.
Yeah,
I see
that
that.
makes sense.
But most parents are like, well, what do we say? We don't want to traumatize them. We don't want to scare them. Anyway, so I did that reel. And on that reel, the audio didn't work, but it got 500,000 views.
Oh my God.
And so I thought, well, and people were like, thank you. This is such a kind way of approaching this.
So what is it? What should you say to a 3-year-old?
So if we actually go into it, which is what the reel was, the first thing when you give a child a device, let's say, for example, you got your phone and you're like, here, say the child, when you're going to watch, what do they watch these days? Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
Coco Manor.
Peppa Pig.
Ethan Gamer.
Yep. So when you
Fulton.
The gamer is different because that's usually 7 or 8 years old. I would say different things to children then compared to what I'd say to a 3-year-old, and I'll tell you. So yeah, when you're watching, if you're ever watching Miss Rachel or Paw Patrol or something like that, you might see something really scary. You might see monsters. You might see ghosts. You might see scary. So you start with things they know. You might see a scary thing like a monster. You might see a gun. You might see shooting. You might even see naked people. You might see lots of scary things. If you ever see it, do you know what you need to do? Ask them, what should you do? And they'll say, I don't know. And they'll be like, that you teach them. You say, what you do, close your eyes, close the iPad and bring it to me. And then they'll say, okay. And the key is to ask them, what did you hear me say? Most parents figure, they think, oh, but I told them. Kid doesn't know. What did you hear me? Oh, you said just bring it to you. That's not what I said. Let's start again. If you see something really scary, what do you think you need to do? You need to close your eyes, shut the iPad, and bring it to me. This is good to have conversation with your partner as well, because I'm going to tell you how the partner can get involved. And then they'll like, oh, just close my eyes. No, let's try one more time. And you keep going until they've literally repeated what you said. Close my eyes, shut the iPad, bring it to you. Well done. Good. Then you give them the iPad, go play. And let them play. And before that, you can even, if you have your partner with you, an added bonus, which is actually even better, is you have this conversation with your kid and then you say to your wife, or your wife will say to you, hey, if our child brought something really scary to you, like ghosts or monsters or guns or shooting or naked people or anything like that, would they be in trouble? Parent needs to say, no way. You will never, and you have to convince your kids that they're not going to be in trouble. If you brought me the scariest things, I'll never be upset with you. If you bring it to me, not if I catch, if you bring it to me, I'll be so proud of you. I wish you bring it. If you show me, I'll protect you. I'll look after you. I'll make sure it never happens to you again. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So would you be angry? No, we would be happy if you brought us the scary things so you can protect us. So now, do you remember what to do? What should you do when you see something scary? So once you have this conversation, right, you let the child off. Now, chances are if you've done that conversation properly, if the child does see something scary, it may not be pornography. It might just be like, scary monsters. And they bring it to you, your reaction must be gratitude. Thank you. You remembered what to do. I'm so proud of you. You brought this to me. Well done. Well done. Good on you. Call the dad. They saw something scary and they brought it to me. I'm so glad. Our kids are so smart. They know what to do. That's how you train them up. So
and they'll forever remember that feeling as well.
100%. 100%. So I think for very young, the education I do and the sexual education I do now, which I fell into, is predominantly with parents. I do a lot of work with parents because at the end of the day, it's not curriculums and systems that save your kid, it's people. And people tend to go to safe people such as their parents. So if their parents are trained on how to be the confident, trusted source of sexual education for their children will go to their parents. And so a lot of the work I did that. So that was for under 7s.
Yeah.
That reel got viral. Everyone was like, oh, we can do that. That's not a problem. I assume you don't even have the conversation at home when I give advice. That's how. So what I've said to you just now, I assume you can go home and tell your children that. It shouldn't be a problem. So that got popular. And then parents were like, can you just give us some advice? So I did a session and another session. And then there was a conference. I got invited to that. And then I got invited to publish a book chapter to give my opinions. And within 12 months, I had 300 parents go through seminars that I did. And that's when they're like, can you do this for schools? And I'm like, actually, I have a master's in education.
Yeah.
I can do that. So I wrote up, curriculum programs and created essentially what I call Healthy Connections Institute. So it's an institute that's there predominantly for parents and also for schools. And so parents can have online courses where a lot of the courses online are here's the content. Here's how to talk to your children about sex or sexuality or LGBTIQ or pornography, whatever it is. And the issue is not content. I'm telling you, parents already know everything they need to know on those topics. Probably too much, if anything. The point is it's pointless to have knowledge if you shut down every time your child speaks to you. Pointless on knowing all the fiqh of it if your child's too scared to talk to you about it. Because if you're not there, someone else will sideline into that. And a lot of the people that I've worked with who've done these crimes, when there are questions you ask them, and I'm sharing this publicly also because it's publicly available in academic research, but they brought a group of these men together and said, we want you to write a manual for how you'd groom children, and we want to know what are the steps that you'd take. And they shared. All of them shared. And then they asked another question. They said, what is the one thing that would have stopped you? What would have stopped you? And 100% of them gave 2 answers. Only 2.
Can I guess one of them?
Yeah.
If they got caught?
No. Getting caught doesn't stop them. They'll just find another child. Or they'll deny it or pretend it didn't happen. Or they'll say, the kid doesn't know what they're talking about. Because these are trusted people. So people are already kind of, I don't know if we have evidence. Well, they're just making a big deal or minimizing and stuff like that. No.
Would you say one of them's a strong father figure?
Yes. Yep. 14% of them said, look at the father first. If the father looks like he's pays attention to the child's distress, maybe that's not the one. Find someone where the dad just leaves it to the mum. Child's crying, distressed. Mum's like, hey, can you come look after? He's like, yeah, I'm with my mates. Can't you see? I'm busy. Yeah, that's the kind of father. Probably that's probably a child where even if the child came crying and the father's not paying attention, why worry? But the more predominant one, which is 86% of them, said what would stop us is if the child showed resistance or knew what was happening. So that is where prevention education comes in. This is the stuff that gives academics the proof to say, well, we need to focus on prevention work. We need to teach children before it happened. And so there's a lot of evidence base that goes into it, but it's not always culturally or religiously aligned. And so a lot of parents, and I think I'm pretty open-minded on this topic, but if, my kids' school came and gave me a letter saying, we're doing sexual education, I would be like, who's teaching? What are they teaching? What's going on? Like, I would freak out, and I'm a professional in this space. So I think what's more important is the parents need to be taught first. Teach the parents, and once you've taught them, I promise you, after I've done my courses with parents, and they're usually live, and also there's online components where parents can purchase a component of how not to freak out, basically. Once you've learned that, then you learn the content. Do not worry about the content. If your heart is beating, if your eyes are like, you think about your parents, if they had some awkward conversation. The biggest education is nonverbal. The biggest education is before you've even finished the sentence. They're already like, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Ya Rabbi, it's time to do tahajjud. Why is our children?" Like, do you know what I mean? So that's the education in itself. Parents not a safe place. So I need to go to friends. I need to go online. I need to go somewhere else. I need to, do something. But parents are so open to have that conversation because they're telling their 7-year-olds when you get married, inshallah, which is a euphemism for when you're going to have sex. Essentially, that's what they're saying, but just in their own cultural way. So how do parents prepare them for that day? They start them from, you need to learn how to cook, you need to learn how to clean, you need to learn how to memorize your Quran so you can teach it to your children. They're training them basically from birth. So there are other training that we can give that really prepares our children in ways that I think are very culturally aligned. And I think because I'm a practicing psychologist, because I have experience specifically in this area, and because I come from a family and a community where I understand all the spectrums of Islam. I'm not a sheikh, but I'm very clear on how we can do this in ways that's still within our faith. And so I do it from a faith-based perspective. We don't tack on Islam. What we do is we start from an Islamic base. And then there are so many schools that said to me, we love what you're doing. Can we have the cultural version without God? Of course you can. You can still, like the conversation I had with the 0 to 7 years old doesn't need to be religious per se. It's just having that skill to do that. And so I'm really excited. Actually, I'm excited about it. This is stuff that keeps me like really excited and going because I feel like,
it's so juicy.
There's I believe it's a misconception, and it's something that I hear a lot from people. Like, for example, victims of SA and other things. And I feel like it's a very ignorant thing to say. And subhanAllah, like, it's victim blaming. It's like, if she didn't go out wearing this, if he didn't go out allowing that to happen, or they didn't allow this to happen, like those things there, like, what's your advice to people who have that kind of mindset?
Yeah. Look, I don't think that's specific to faith or culture. It's very predominant everywhere where people look to women and be like, well, if you weren't drunk and if you weren't dressed like that and if you didn't look that way, often when we look at things like SA or sexual abuse, what we're often talking about is a crime of power. More often than not, it's not about pleasure. It's about I can do what I want, when I want to, who I want, how I want it. That's usually what it is. And so when we talk about, okay, but prevention is actually just tightening your hijab around your chin a bit more, or you shouldn't have been in that situation, or why was that man abused? Oh, it's because he was drinking and was found in a promiscuous place. So what do you expect? I think we need to remember that first of all, people are always responsible for their own actions. Secondly, a lot of sexual abuse, we know in Australia that before the age of 16, 1 in 3 young women will experience sexual abuse before 16. 1 in 5 young men before the age of 16, up to year 9s. That is a significant number of people experiencing it. So you go to a school, you're teaching maths and English, there's probably about a third of the students that have experienced either ongoing or one-off, but they've experienced it. And so when we talk about these children, what can they do to prevent it? 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds. They were drinking? They were dressed inappropriately? No. It is the person who's doing the wrong thing that needs to be held to account. So I think we need to really revisit what it means to be a victim. The true victim is the one who couldn't help themselves and felt like they had to take on somebody else's personal space. To become a perpetrator is the true victim. Because how could you live a life where you feel entitled to take on someone else's space, regardless of what they're wearing and what they're doing? And, you know, so I think it's easy to say, oh, well, it's all the victim's fault. But what if we turned that on its head and said the victim is a group of 5-year-old children, all in kindergarten, and the perpetrator was a child support worker? Does that make sense? So this is where sometimes, again, maybe because the background I have is a lot more diverse. Oh, hang on. People just get exposed to one and think it's all that.
It's not 2D, yeah.
Pardon?
It's not 2D.
Yeah, and I think if there's a great thing about this, the great thing about this conversation is the best thing we can do is to have these conversations, and they're not happening in our communities, partly because we don't know how to have them, partly because they're seen as too graphic or risque, and I'm here to change that. Because actually we can have these conversations. We do have these conversations. It's within the Muslim tradition. We know the Prophet ﷺ took questions from men and women on all sorts of sexuality and sexual-based topics, and people came to him to genuinely talk about their issues. The Sahaba at the time were even asking about sexual positions. That is how graphic they went, and it was so open that we're still repeating those hadith today. That there were certain things that women refused to do and didn't want to engage with, that it was causing rifts in marriage. So yes, we do have part of our faith where you should keep things private. You should keep them to yourself. You shouldn't be trashing out your partner. And we also have parts that there's no taboo. We should be talking about it. So where's the balance? And I think the balance is in context. I think that's context, like we were talking about earlier, is king. If content is amazing, context is the cream of the crop. And so context matters. And I think the context of the work that I'm doing, which is educating parents first and foremost, and, you know, supporting schools to be able to educate parents and students, I think is an honorable thing. And, you know, it's something I'm very proud and happy and grateful that, you know, I've been given this chance to do.
You know, before you were saying you've done some work on that framework of like, the chances of offenders re-offending consistently, yeah?
Yes.
What are what is the likelihood, first of all, that keeps on happening? And second, what prevents them from never committing that again? Because this sort of comes from, I don't know if you guys seen, there's this series by this YouTuber, Gideon, where he goes around, it's called exposing
criminals who've harmed people sexually.
Children specifically, you know? And then when I first watched it was just brain rot content. I'm just eating food. Let me just chuck this on. I couldn't watch after the first episode. Yeah. And then after one day, I put on one episode. Then I started seeing myself like binging these episodes. But then I wasn't binging it just because it's a YouTuber catching someone doing this. But it was more so when he would catch these people, not in the act, but before it's happening, their meeting up process and stuff, he would consistently ask them like questions like, why did you do this? And like he'll frame it in a way where he's friends with them. And funnily enough, it causes them to like completely like open up, you know. And there's always two things. There's the power thing that you mentioned. And then there's the whole concept of never being like caught, you know. But then he mentions, and he always says this, which is quite interesting as well, even if they get caught, what happens? They get chucked in jail. Then they come back out. But who's to say that they won't do the same thing again if they're put in this sort of like environment? So that goes back to now my question. How likely is it for them to consistently reoffend?
So we can never guarantee who will and who won't offend. We can only talk about likelihood. And what helps us choose or determine the likelihood is to look at what we call risk factors. So what are these? If these factors are present, it is more likely that this person will reoffend, right? So there are certain risk factors that we assess. That's what we assess for, risk factors, and depending on how many of them they have. So one of the risk factors is this person like, do they have access to children? You know, one of them can be, do they have access to children? Is the child known to them? Have they experienced it before too? That doesn't mean that if you've experienced sexual abuse, you'll go on to sexual abuse others. Absolutely not. But we need to understand context. So what will tell us is the risk factors. So someone who ticks 7 out of 8 boxes, you got to kind of think the education for them is different to the person. Let me explain this in a simple way. There are certain risk factors as a psychologist that will determine how likely someone is to reoffend.
Yep.
Once you've calculated those risk factors, a person will either be high, medium, or low. Now, if they're high, they will receive a different treatment dosage to the one who's low. Because if you put them together, there is a risk that the one who's low may actually get educated and become high. So you keep the high with the high, the medium with the medium, and the low may be individual. It might be just training. It might be because, again, context is really important for that.
What does treatment look like? Sorry.
Yep. So treatment often looks
not in detail, but like just roughly.
Yeah, I can go through details. Yeah, it's not a secret per se. So the treatment has different modes, so different ways of doing it. So one treatment is talk therapy. So that is either individual or in group. There is evidence to show that group-based therapy is good because it's sort of you got all people together dealing with the same issue. But again, you got to make sure that you're dealing like with like and not just putting everyone together. The other modality of treatment, there are different ones. The one that I deal with is talk therapy. You know, there are in different countries with different rules. They have different regulations that if you get caught, they have punishments and things like that too. Which that's not my area of expertise. But what I will say in Australia is that we do have something that even if you have been sentenced and if you've come to the end of your sentence and you are still a high risk to the community, they can revisit that again because the safety of the community is paramount. And so as far as I know, and in my experience of the government, they don't intend to release people who they know are definitely going to go and offend. Are there risks? Absolutely. And that's why we have registers. That's why we have, for example, like we have certain conditions for where they can live and where they can be near and where they can and can't work. So the treatment might also be prevention-based sort of strategies as well. So it can be combinations of that. So the idea is, by the way, we're doing a lot of focus on people that have been convicted. Most people don't get convicted. That's the wild part.
Wow.
The wild part
Majority?
is majority are not convicted. But because the burden of proof or the evidence is not always there. The child will say it, but then they're not using the correct anatomical names for their body. They'll say, well, he touched my back and pointing to their bottom. He hurt my stomach and they're holding it between their legs. And they'll say, well, sorry, it doesn't work in court because, you know, the child could be mistaken. Maybe they were confused and so on and so on.
Oh, wow.
So when I do education with parents, one of the advice I give when they say 0 to 7, how do you teach them the correct anatomical names of their body? And then I teach them how to do that because they're like, oh, that's weird saying a name like the actual graphic, like how do you say that? So I teach parents, you know, how to do that with their children so that, you know, and I hope it never happens, but if it does, again, 86% of people who went to the effort of being convicted will say, if they know what they're doing, stay away.
Yeah, no, definitely.
If they flinch, stay away. If they say, what are you doing? Stay away because they're going to ask that to someone else.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And like, I think they always talk about like educating the children on the places where it's like, do not let anybody touch. Should we like genuinely just tell them that your whole space?
And again, so this is part of, and I think a lot of parents will benefit when they do the work with me. This is actually what I teach them because I can see in a lot of parents, they have fear and that is not what your child needs to see from you. Like the same... The conversation that we had about giving the device, was that scary? No. It was actually, you felt empowered. You're like, yeah. So I have exactly the same strategies for how to talk about bodies, how to talk about Islam, which stories of the Prophet, which stories of a Quran to explain. When they ask, but where did I come from? But how did I get there? But then why do you need a mum and dad to have a child together? So all of these things are stuff that I cover with parents like one by one. And I start, just like I did with all of you, with an assumption that it doesn't even exist, that you didn't even have that conversation. And it starts from something very natural that they already know. So no, I wouldn't teach a parent to say like, this is all your body. And then they're like, and then my mum touches me in a way I don't want to be told. Like, no, but we didn't mean it like so
that.
It can get confusing.
Yeah.
So what I do is actually take the time and teach parents, This is how you do it. When you teach the parent can go off and do what they want afterwards.
You know, they sometimes say like you can obviously give your child all the tools, you know, to recognize when this is happening, the education behind it and whatnot. But then they often say like, but don't teach your boys to become like perpetrators, like offenders and stuff like that, control your child in that sense. Do you do the opposite in the sense that when you see, but I don't know how you can see like a child or a person being like a risk factor. But do you get what I mean? Like the opposite way around.
So a lot of people, so the mentality is what you focus on will grow. So if you focus on the concept of labels like predator or child, you know, herders and things like that, then that's where your focus is going to be. My focus is to have healthy connections. And that is a far more powerful way to engage with your child.
Correct, yeah.
To teach them how to be at one with their body, to teach themselves. And you know, one of the models, the frameworks that I use in my work is, you may be familiar with it, it's like the prophetic method for parenting, 777. So from 0 to 7, you teach a child through play. From 8 to like, you know, 12 or 13, you teach them like, you know, through discerning and discipline, or like teaching them right and wrong. And then from 14 onwards, you advise them. And so that sits really well in terms of cognitive development when we talk about psychology. So, you know, I can make my session just for kindergartens, but I don't, because children develop differently. So it's 0 to 7, 8 to, you know, 13, and then 13 plus. And so there are different issues, but if we deal with them in a positive way. So I'll give you another example. So you want to teach children, very young children, about boundaries. A good way to teach up to the age of 7, tickling. Best way to teach them. You tickle a child, and as soon as they say stop, what do you think you should do? Stop. And so you keep tickling them and playing with rough play is another very good one with children, particularly fathers with their daughters and with their sons. Rough play, 100%. Throw them, pick them up, whatever they want. And when they say stop, you need to stop immediately and tell them, I'm going to stop because you said no. You know, sometimes people keep tickling. You're like, stop, but it hurts. And it's just, you don't want it, but they're still doing it.
It's half laughter, half crying. Yeah.
Exactly. So what you do is you stop. And then as soon as they stop and calm, they're like, oh, now do it again. Then you start again. And so what happens is you're teaching that child, I'm respecting your space and your body. When you say, I've had enough. So, and same thing with their brothers and sisters. So like, you can rough play with your sister, and then as soon as she says stop, you need to stop. So you're teaching the boys to recognize bodily cues, empathy, tears, body language. Did you notice she didn't want it? Her eyes were down and she wasn't interested. And so, but if they're seeing dad and uncle just tickling without stopping, well, they're going to do that too. It starts innocent, doesn't it? But the idea is that, imagine now, if you're that family that plays that game with that child regularly, and then they go to a cousin's house and that cousin doesn't stop tickling, even if it's innocent. They'll say, I don't like you because you don't stop tickling me. My parents don't. When I say no, my parents stop and you don't stop. And so now it's good because now the parents are aware, okay, someone is playing with my child in a way that my child doesn't want to be played with. Does that make sense?
So again, boundaries,
so what I do is, again, I develop a whole series of like games and activities and toys, and because of the experience that I have and I've had years, for me, I was like, oh, don't people know this? Like for me, parents are like, no, this is groundbreaking. I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel that way, but that's what a lot of the parent programs that I have do. They teach parents how to be not the first source of education, not the last. Trust me, your kids will get knowledge from other people too. But if you can pivot yourself as the most trusted source of sexual education for their children, you're onto a winner. That's the winning game. Not really to be the first one or the last one or the most knowledgeable one. It's about being the trusted one.
I wanted to take this conversation to an age where they start to see changes within themselves and obviously hormonally, internally. And it comes to a stage where maybe at their house they don't have anyone to talk about these certain things. I'm a high school teacher. I haven't had this conversation with any of my students, but I feel like in the future there could be a chance, nieces and nephews I have or cousins, even though I don't have kids myself, these things can happen to all of us. Where there could be an opportunity where it's like this person's not getting the chance to have an open conversation. What do we do? What do you recommend?
I think it's such a good question when children are growing older. So that takes us to the 7 to 12. So that's puberty that we're talking about. Puberty is a really important time where a lot of changes are happening. So if we go back to the prophetic method, it's teach. So you need to teach your children. And so when it comes to the framework of sexual education, 0 to 7, if 0 to 7 is play, we know now from modern psychology that play-based therapy, or play-based education and learning, or play comes from safety. So it's about teaching a child safety. It's teaching them the what. Remember, they're born without any knowledge of the world. You teach them what the body parts are, right? And once they hit 7 or 6 or 8 or whatever, that's when you teach them what. What does your body do? Like how, you move from what to how. So how does your body operate in that way? This is where you start teaching them things like hygiene, or teaching them showering, or looking after themselves, and that there will be like changes on their body and so on. So when we talk about puberty, I think part of our faith is that we have to teach that knowledge. What I'm suggesting is that our community is not doing it appropriately because they're trying to balance all of these things, a bit of this, a bit of that, and the meal doesn't taste great. And so what I'm doing is putting all of that together and offering it as a package. So how would I do that? If I was going to teach, again, in the programs that I have online for parents, I go through this topic. So puberty or changes in the body, and again, different topics. So puberty is one, sexual reproduction is another, like conception is another. Like these are all topics that we can talk to children very comfortably. I'll talk to you about puberty right now, how you'd explain it from an Islamic perspective, and you tell me how comfortable you would feel to teach that to your child. So, and this is what I taught my children. If you're going to, maybe I'll start with non-Muslims first. So if I was doing this from a cultural perspective, I would teach the child about change. So you bring up a 7 or 8-year-old and you say to them, what do you think is the difference between, and it's great when there's a newborn baby around. So what do you think might be the difference between you and that baby over there? What can you do with your body that baby doesn't know how to do? And they'll be like, I don't know. So we'll let's start from the top. Let's go mouth. What can you do with your mouth that baby can't? Oh, I can eat, I can chew, I can swallow, I can have dessert. Great. What else can you do? Look at its body. Oh, I can sit, I can walk, I can stand. Yep. What about its private parts? What can you do that baby can't do? Oh, haha. They might start giggling. Like, yeah. All right, let me ask that question again. Why do they wear nappies and you don't? What can you do with your body that you don't have to wear nappies? Oh, I can go to the toilet. Exactly. So you can do so many things with your body that baby can't do. Now, let's look at, let's say it's a boy, let's look at your uncle or your dad. What do you think might be the difference between you and him? What are the changes? And they'll be like, he's taller, he's bigger, he's got hair on his face. And they might not be able to pick up. So I'll be like, what about your voices? Do your voices sound the same? No, his is different. Can you imagine if he sounded like an 8-year-old and they think it's hilarious? And you're like, yep. So you teach them that there's differences in their body. So, yep, your body grows, but your private parts will grow bigger. You'll get hair. You just kind of bring it as part, everything grows is basically what you're teaching them. Once you've taught them that, then you say, well, do you know when you're going to become like that? Do you know there's going to be something that's going to happen in your body and you're going to end up like that too? Do you know what that is? And they'll say, no. So you're going to go through something called puberty. Do you know what puberty means? It's when a chemical in your brain releases a hormone, and that's when all the changes in your body happen, right? That is puberty at a high level, like you've explained it to them. So you might say changes in your body, and then you can talk so on and so on. If it was from an Islamic perspective, and they say, well, what's puberty? I would say puberty to a Muslim child, puberty is a time of your life where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided you need to start asking for forgiveness. That's what puberty is. Because before puberty, Allah doesn't want you to ask for forgiveness. He wants you to do whatever you want. So let me tell you a story. I want to tell you a story of Adam alayhi salam. You tell them the story of Adam and Hawa and Iblis, and you talk about how Adam alayhi salam made a mistake. And what did he do when he made that mistake? What did Adam ask for, alayhi salam? Forgiveness. He said, forgive me. And Allah forgave him, because that's what Allah does. Allah forgives us. There was another character in the story who did a mistake as well. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Do you know about him? What's his name? What did he do? He dug his heels in. His name was Iblis. So Allah is giving us the same chance to choose. Do we want to be like Adam alayhi salam, or do we want to be like Iblis? Which one do you want to be? I want to be like Adam. Great. So when you reach puberty, what's going to happen is that Allah is going to expect you to say, do you know how to ask for forgiveness? We say, astaghfirullah, right? And then, but when does it happen? Like, how old are you? Oh, let me tell you about that. Well, there's a special chemical that gets released in your head when you're about, we don't know what age that is, but let me tell you about when that chemical gets released. And then you teach them, what's the difference between you and this child? What's the difference? And then you continue the conversation. So now we've had a conversation about puberty in a way that doesn't go into graphic details, that a parent has a choice on how graphic they want to be, right? The same thing. A lot of male Islamic teachers, they, well, how do we talk about periods and how do we explain why mum's not praying? And I've got so many of these stories. All I do is, so a lot of my workshops with parents is mainly just storytelling, talking and explaining. And what we're doing in that whole process for me as the psychologist is reducing the parents' angst, teaching them there is a way to do this. You don't have to freak out, even if you don't know the answer. And then we go through, how do you deal with it if you don't know the answer? That's
SubhanAllah. I feel like whenever we grew up, at least, like SubhanAllah, like the taboo-ness of it all, like really tarnished the ability for that conversation to be had. And it's like, it's not because, like, for example, our parents weren't equipped with the ability to do that. It was more so around the shame, like you were saying, like the body itself, there's nothing, there's no connotation surrounding it. It's just anatomy, pretty much. And the only time that that's taken in the wrong direction is when there's context.
Context is so important.
Yeah. So for the parents out there who have currently, like, they might have already gone a little bit down the other avenue. Is the hope lost, or can they somehow wrangle it back?
Absolutely. Look, I had interestingly, a lot of the parent seminars I have, it's 60-40, 40% male, 60% female. Fathers attend. And a lot of the fathers said to me, I thought it was sex education and I thought that was weird. Like, I just didn't want to attend. I didn't want to lecture on how to talk to my kids about body anatomy and, sexual positions and weird things that should just be me and my wife. Like, I don't need that. But once it clicked and they realized this is about making myself the trusted source of education for my children, and so I need to rethink about all of those things I already know, the whole picture changes. Like, men get on board really quickly. They're like, yep, I actually, and a lot of men want to talk to their children about this, to their teen. They just don't know how to. And so they haven't been given those tools. And like, that's what I'm there to do, inshallah. One of the fathers attended my session because he said his wife made him do it. But the real reason he attended was because of an experience he had with his son. And this talks to context really importantly. He was driving in the car doing shopping with his son, and randomly his son was like, Dad, what's a virgin? And the dad was like,
on the spot.
Like, yeah, really on the spot. So, but, he wanted to be a good father. So he told his son what a virgin was from a sexual perspective. And it was like, it's what it is. And, inshallah, if you ever want to ask me, you can always like, do you get what I mean? And he was like, then why does mum want us to bring home a virgin tonight? And he was like, what do you mean? Where did you hear this? And she's like, well, she said virgin oil. Like, I knew what oil was. I just didn't know what virgin was. And so context is so important.
Yeah.
And if fathers don't have context, conversations can unnecessarily go to places they don't have to. So,
that's true, especially with social media, Reddit, Twitter, all these forums, everyone's sharing an opinion that don't have an actual
context.
Exactly. Background. They're not a professional in that.
So context is important. And so I help parents manage and deal with context. And the man, bless his soul, was trying to do the right thing, but didn't even ask his child. He just launched straight into it. And so that's the other parent. They're so excited. And so I have this quiz for parents. I can link it to your podcast. So I have a quiz that I give to parents. You answer these questions. It tells you your parent profile, what kind of a parent you are. Are you the ostrich, head in the sand? Are you the type who's like lecturing and just never ends? And then whatever your profile is, it actually gives you feedback on what you need, what can help, what needs to change,
really
and how to do that. So that's something I'm keen.
Amazing. We'll link in the description.
Yeah, and I think in another episode, inshallah, like, I would love to do an episode about like parenting styles, trauma.
A lot more detail,
and a lot more detail and focus that on,
100%.
Definitely.
I appreciate being on the show. Thank you so much, guys.
No, this was a lovely conversation.
It was our pleasure, honestly.
Yeah.
No, this was like, it just gets better and better.
Yeah.
100%. And the best part of all of this is we actually haven't even delved into like specifics with any of the topics,
Yeah.
And shout out to you with all the work that you've done from, Girl Just a Dream to on the grand stage with Abiy Ahmed.
It wasn't Abiy, it was Shamilis Abdisa. So he's the prime minister.
Okay.
I went with the president.
Okay.
Just being, got to be clear. Yeah.
But shout out.
Not the president, not the prime
Not my president. I'm joking. You know, and honestly, like even from your TEDx talk, we'd even talk about that as well. You know, so inshallah, you continue doing trailblazing work. We appreciate it. And we'll definitely run back another episode. Any final words, boys?
Of course. I want to give her the space to talk about some exciting developments that she has, inshallah, coming up.
Yeah.
Plug anything. Come on.
Well, I think this is the conversations that we've had really just comes back to what I've created, which is Healthy Connections Institute. And so that is an institute of education for parents and for schools about, okay, I've heard this. What do I do next? I recommend a lot of parents take the quiz. Like, you don't need me. Some things should be for free. Some things should not be paid for. So go and find out about yourself. What is it that you need for you specifically? And if once you've found out your profile, you want to do your own research, go for it. But if you'd like support from me in terms of, okay, well, let me show you how to be that trusted source. Here's what you need. And I can take you through those steps as well. And most parents who've gone through that, once they get super confident, they're like, why isn't this happening at school? Why isn't the children being taught at school? They start to realize. And so it works better for the schools because the schools say, well, if the parents are on board, it's so much easier. And in fact, children should be the last ones to be taught. It should be the parents, it should be the school at a leadership level and the staff and then the students. And so I offer that opportunity and I'm really excited for people who want to tune in and find out, do the quiz. That's what I recommend for you.
The quiz in the description.
Random question before the episode ends. Do you listen to podcasts in general?
Sometimes.
What's your go-to podcast? Just out of curiosity.
My own.
Nice. And second last question before I end it, what's your coffee order?
Soy latte, half strength, extra hot.
Nice.
Extra hot if I'm busy. If I'm sitting and chilling, it'll just be soy latte, half strength.
Yeah, we're gonna have to cut that one out because extra hot on a coffee is a bit.
Yeah, that's why I'm worried I'm just gonna lose everyone. So I'm like soy latte, half strength. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, one last question, but this is the last one, because we usually ask all our guests this question. And obviously, this episode's been about a lot of the work that you've done and whatnot. So it'll be a bit more fitting on this rather than in a future episode when we get into specifics.
Yeah.
With like what you know now and what you've gathered through all this time and your experiences and whatnot, what would you tell your younger self, younger Toltu, that went traveling, that got their advice from her granddad?
Both, actually, from my father, my mother, and my granddad. I would tell her she's allowed to rest. And I would also tell her that she's on the right path. That everything she's doing is going to come full circle. And that if even things don't look like they're going right now, you are on the right path.
I love it. What a way to end the episode.
It's a great one.
Appreciate it, Toltu. Guys, you know the drill. Without further ado, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment. I didn't say that last week, but we'll see you next week. Peace.